Hi, my name is Seán Brady. I'm a research entomologist and curator of Hymenoptera. I've been at my current position for about 4 years, and today I'm going to focus my talk on reconstructing social evolution in one particular group of bees. A major component of my research program involves documenting the origins and evolutionary success of insect societies, particularly eusocial insects. Now, although the precise definition of what a eusocial insect is has been a moving target over the years, its principal characteristic is a stable group in which one or a few individuals reproduce, indicated by the queen, the large ant on the left of the picture. In contrast, the majority of individuals in a eusocial society forego reproducing and instead spend all their energies working to raise the queen's offspring. This type of social organization is frequently regarded as a major evolutionary transition on par with only a few other watershed events in the history of life, such as the rise of multicellular life and sexual reproduction. Today I'm going to concentrate on the origins of eusociality, which boils down to the question of why would an organism ever decide, in an evolutionary sense, not to pass its genes down to the next generation, but rather to help another individual, namely the queen, to do so. Now, I will not discuss potential answers to this question, which remains one of the most outstanding questions in evolutionary biology, but rather I will argue that we can't fruitfully study the origins of eusociality until we know where and when during the history of life this major evolutionary transition has occurred. The vast majority of eusocial organisms are insects. I show here an insect phylogeny not to talk about the relationships, but simply to provide a listing of the major lineages of insects. Although a surprisingly large number of insect groups display some form of parental care, as indicated by the black dots, only a few groups have evolved full eusociality with reproducing queens and non-reproducing workers. Now, termites, which are essentially social cockroaches, certainly can be considered a major eusocial lineage, but as indicated by the larger star at the bottom of the figure, most of the action when it comes to eusociality occurs in this group of bees, ants, and stinging wasps, both in terms of the number of origins of eusociality and the total numbers of species. Now, we still don't know exactly how many times eusociality evolved in this group, and I'm going to summarize one such investigation by myself and my colleagues in the remainder of this talk. Now, here's another perspective of eusocial origins, showing when we think eusociality evolved within each group. Things get older as you move to the left of this diagram, such as termites are the oldest group, followed by the ants, and then the wasps and the bees. I'm going to focus my talk on two groups of bees called halictid bees, which are also known as sweat bees because they're often attracted to the salt in human sweat. Now, as you can see from this figure, they are among the very youngest of major eusocial insect lineages. Earlier work by myself and colleagues, in which we combined genetic and fossil data, indicated that both of these eusocial lineages occurred about 20 million years ago. But just the act of calling these two groups separate eusocial lineages involves some key assumptions on our part. I depict these two eusocial lineages in red at the top of the figure, as shown by the arrows. We assumed that two separate evolutionary events led to eusociality in each group because that is the simplest assumption, a procedure known as maximum parsimony. However, it would only require one additional evolutionary event, as indicated by the arrow on the left, which would involve one origin of eusociality, followed by two losses of eusociality, as indicated by the two arrows on the right. So which scenario really happened, one origin or two? Now, the situation is further compounded by the fact that in our earlier work, we were unable to procure samples from this other lineage indicated by the arrows, most of which are solitary, but has a few instances of eusocial species. So to provide a better answer to this question of single versus dual origins, we gathered more genetic data, and more importantly, we gathered data from a lot more species of these sweat bees. After we gathered these data, we analyzed our data not using parsimony as before, but using new model-based methods to reconstruct the evolution of eusociality. These more sophisticated methods allow us to include much more information in our analyses. For example, an older lineage that has been around for a long period of time has a much greater chance of either evolving sociality or losing it, compared to a very young lineage that simply hasn't been around long enough for evolution to act on it. The result of adding these new species and these new methods of analyses indicate with high probability that eusociality evolved once in the group, and this is indicated by the pie charts here, where eusociality is indicated in red and solitary in gray. The arrow points to the early ancestors of this group, and you can see by the predominantly red color in the pie charts that there's about a 90% chance that the early ancestors of this group were eusocial. So this conclusion of a single origin of eusociality has several important implications. Our analyses indicate that sociality in this group is almost twice as old as we originally thought, shifting our estimates from 20 million years to about 35 million years. Any genetic characteristic that is found in both these social lineages, Halictus and Hemohalictus here, might be due to a common ancestor. And finally, our additional species sampling suggests that some sweat bee species may be the product of secondary evolution, in which a social ancestor reverted to a solitary state and then later on in evolutionary time re-evolved a eusocial condition. Now, if this conclusion is true, and it's going to require some more verification on our part, then some sweat bee species may represent a unique case among all major eusocial animals in which this major evolutionary transition evolved more than once during their evolutionary history. I would like to thank my collaborators on these projects, and I will take my one question. Thank you. John.
Does your data fit Ed Wilson's new ideas about the overall driving forces for social evolution?
So I promised I wouldn't answer the question of origins of sociality. Our data don't really address that. It's a more comparative view. What John is referring to is the idea of the comparative influence of genetics versus the role of ecological factors, such as being able to defend a nest. And that's the subject of future studies, but it's only by identifying where exactly in the tree of life did eusociality evolve can we really get a handle on answering these important questions, such as the one that was mentioned. Thank you.